Hello, welcome back everyone. We are now on the final part, and I'm not going to waste much time with an intro because I don't know why you would start watching at this point, and I don't know what else to add aside from that. Hopefully I've released this part not too long after the previous one. Let's get right back into it. So we're finally getting to the tail end of everything, my beloved viewers. Now this episode is special in that it is the shortest episode of the season, and the best way to describe it would be to call it mostly set up for the next episode. And despite it being the shortest episode, it is still so unbelievably padded that you could easily cut out 10 to 15 minutes of it and nothing would be lost. Geralt's section loops back around to the events of the first episode as he sees Nilfgaard on the move.
As you can see, our situation is shockingly grim.
After finally deciding to accept his destiny, he heads to Sintra to cash in on his free child coupon. Geralt finally accepting this whole destiny business seems a little sloppily done if I'm being honest. I'm guessing the end of the last episode was meant to be him coming to grips with that, but it seems like we're missing a scene or two to justify this new determination to start taking this whole destiny stuff seriously. I mean, there is some setup for this and some of the pieces are in place, but it feels a little rushed, which man oh man is that a shocker when it comes to this series. After narrowly avoiding a bunch of assassins to prevent him from cashing in his coupon, Geralt reaches Sintra and speaks with Calanthe a few days before her little window mishap. She tells him that his coupon is expired and she's not giving up Ciri, but Geralt replies by saying it's better to ensure that Ciri is as safe as possible, and if they win the upcoming fight, he'll bring her back, but if they don't, then at least she'll be in a safe place. And that is a fairly reasonable compromise, but Calanthe does whatever she can to prevent that from happening, because the show needs her to be unnecessarily unreasonable in order for the upcoming events to play out. And I know that the show is highlighting that she is in the wrong here, but I just think it's a needlessly stupid way to make her look like a retard. It's not compelling, it's annoying. Also, there is no tension as to how this plays out. We know Geralt is not going to be leaving with Ciri, we just get this really bad back and forth where, for the most part, we know the result, and where, yet again, our time is being wasted. Once again, in the books, this was handled a lot differently and a lot less stupidly. To begin with, Geralt first came back roughly 6 years after the Night of the Werehog, a time where Sintra was not under threat. In that story, he had no intention of recruiting Ciri, one, because he had no idea whether she was a boy or a girl yet assumed it to be the former, and two, he simply wanted to understand what all this autistic destiny business was about. Furthermore, Calanthe did make things very difficult, but was somewhat more willing to give him Ciri, where it made a lot more sense for her not to do so because Ciri was not in danger, she didn't want to lose her, and she discovered how witches are made. Understandably, she was not interested in having her grandchild being horribly mutated and MK Ultra'd. Also, Geralt was not around when Sintra got fucking power slammed into the dirt. He was on his way there as it was happening, which he should have done instead because at least there, Geralt would actually be doing something. Hell, you could even provide some more meaningful character development that further showcases this new resolve to protect Ciri. But instead we get this, where they had to come up with a poor reason for Geralt to be here early because otherwise he would not be remotely involved in this episode. Meaning that they forced him to be here where he barely does anything. Very epic. Calanthe eventually folds and gives up Ciri, or rather she gives up some random child because she still won't actually fold. Geralt tells her to stop fucking around and she tells him to fuck off again. As he's being escorted out, he's still being stubborn and refuses to leave, and then this happens.
I need your promise you won't come back.
If I hear Ciri's in danger, you know I can't do that.
He is very lucky he wasn't standing a couple feet forward. Also, I did laugh at the scene unintentionally because I was imagining what they would do if they mistimed it and he was just stuck on the other side of the gate before they could trap him.
You stupid n-
It's not really a criticism or anything, it's just a funny thought that I had. Anyway, Geralt is imprisoned, and this is a perfect example as to why this episode is padded since they just reuse scenes from the first episode, with snippets of Geralt added in between where he escapes from his cell as the capital is raped and pillaged. Incredibly boring and pointless. Now, don't get me wrong, you can show the same scenes from different perspectives and stories and it can be done to great effect, but the purpose behind it is that you usually gain more insight into how the events unfolded or how characters react to those events. Here, that is not the case because we're not learning anything new from seeing Sintra getting toppled again. Nothing substantial is gained, there is no new or interesting revelation, not even a cool fight scene or something. It's just that you see Geralt escape and that's it. Again, completely pointless. So Geralt flees through the chaos, narrowly missing Ciri, and that is his story for this episode. A borderline borderline nothing burger of a section.
Oh shit.
Yen's portion is filled with a lot of nothing, at least until towards the very end of it. She journeys towards this random excavation site where she meets up with
Tread,
the first man who used to ground pound her into submission, and she ends up asking if they wanted to start ball slapping each other again. This results in a pretty funny scene where he denies her because he has come to the based realization that sex isn't that cool, he has very little interest in her anymore, and would rather be digging for ruins.
Henge's dead language is anything to get closer to you again, and every request I made was denied. You shut them all down. Forget about the girl, get back to work, and the work saved me. Remember why I loved it, the beauty, the purity, no distractions when I'm in it. You went after the thing you loved. I'm sorry you chose power.
The fact that she seems very bitter about this is hilarious because I don't know what the fuck you were expecting, especially since A, so much time has passed, B, he tried to reconcile with you but you ignored him, and C, you ended the relationship on very bad terms. Immediately after, this mustached gentleman named Vilgefortz, who is a fairly important character but who gives a shit, walks up and informs Yen of a meeting between all of the mages, because the current large-scale invasion from a nation of radical dudes with funny voices is a matter that might need some serious discussion. They go back to Mage Island, where Yen meets a group of up-and-coming apprentices while waiting for the meeting to start. We are then greeted with an obnoxious sequence as for the next few minutes Yen makes a magical devil lettuce concoction and gets high with these trainees. Also, she is now kind of offended by the idea of them now accepting shitty mages into the magic school.
Your parents paid Aretusa.
Look at this place. It's a joke. Letting in girls who can't even do magic.
Okay, why should you care? Like, if anything, you should be happy that this place is going down the shithole. You win in the end if that is the case. But after all her bitching, Yen tries to red pill these girls on how evil this place is, and once again, the show inadvertently highlights how she is a shitty person. Now, this is something that I didn't mention on the first part because it wasn't that relevant, but during the second episode, they highlight that if mages aren't very good at magic in this academy, they turn them into eels. Now, this is a pretty fucked up thing to do, and the show points that out. However, in episode 2, she kind of gives a shit that this just happened, but gets over it relatively quickly. In fact, she seems more in awe of this fact rather than in horror, like she is outright smiling at one point. Yet only now does she make a big stink about it, as a convenient example to show these girls how evil this place is.
Even if you do everything right, follow their rules, that's still no guarantee you'll get what you want.
And again, it's kind of fucked up, but she only gives a shit when she believes she has been personally wronged. Like, if they did not fuck her over in any regard, she would not be singing this tune. So her trying to take the moral high ground here is eye-rolling to say the least, and is just another example of her slimy behaviour that showcases her narcissistic tendencies. This 6-minute long section is not only boring, but so painful to sit through that it was a godsend when Yen's old mentor shows up and tells her to stop doing this bullshit, and decides to give her a brief reality check.
You ruined one life. Stop there.
Owned. After all that, the mages decide to start their council meeting, with a handful of them saying it's not a good idea to allow these silly fellas with their horribly designed uniforms to conquer foreign nations without intervention. The majority, however, couldn't care less, and since they're not involved, it's not their problem.
If Sintra falls, who cares?
Especially when the Nilfgaardian representative, Fringilla, tells everyone that Sintra is their only target and they have no intention of invading any other country, and they are totally not lying, winky face. Now, I mentioned this in the last part, but it's kind of hilarious how shit this organization is. Like, the show repeatedly states that the Brotherhood is evil and oppressive and uses various means to control their students, but they seem perfectly fine not controlling one of their own pupils who straight up threatens to kill them if they get in their way.
If you won't take sides, then at least stay out of our way.
Like, she is literally out of their control, and they seemingly do not give a fuck. Any oppressive regime worth their salt would not tolerate this and would shut it down immediately. Why would they be content having an enormous empire that appears intent on conquering the entire continent remain unchecked? Kinda seems like that's going against your intentions.
Unchecked kings and queens lead to rebellions, massacres, It's the reason this chapter was formed.
Even if this statement is just bullshit lip service in his mind, don't at least half of these guys genuinely believe this? Do you not think that the rampaging borderline superpower might affect your ability to control other nations? Either Yen is as usual a bit of a dumb retard, or the show has done a very shit job of portraying the Brotherhood as an actually oppressive organization, or at the very least, as an effective one. Honestly, this entire scene consists of mainly the mages arguing like they all suffer from a unique form of mental retardation, because a lot of this comes across as childish, and it's a little hilarious, especially after Yen starts shit-talking them. Our good old one-dimensional Wiener Lord replies with this.
Maybe it is time for something different.
Pipe down. You don't get a vote.
I don't know why, but this is really funny to me. Sorry, you don't get to decide on what we do because you are being a big meanie head. Also, several others don't get to vote because one called me gay and another kicked me out of the blood drinking competition. Anywho, they take a vote and most of the other mages don't want any part in this, while a minority of them, including Mustache McGee, Cold Bitch, Sean King, among others, decide that fighting powerful empires is actually pretty cool. Yen is convinced to join them in defending an old fort that stands in Nilfgaard's way, which leads into the next episode. Very little was achieved here, but at least it's heading somewhere. Ciri's portion is relatively short, but has nothing of immense interest or note happen, which I guess is the thematic through line for most of this episode, but I'll give a quick summary. After pretty much losing her only friend in this war-torn countryside, Ciri tries to figure out where the hell she is and where she needs to go. After stumbling across a marketplace village thing, she encounters this weirdly persistent lady who is very interested in finding out where she's heading. The good Samaritan that she is, she offers Ciri a place to stay. Ciri, in response, decides to steal one of her horses. Kind of a shitty thing to do, but in all honesty, I wouldn't trust a single thing this lady says. I will elaborate as to why in the next episode. Later on, Ciri makes camp as she talks to this horse because she is on the verge of a severe mental breakdown. She is soon approached by a group of charming gentlemen who have no nefarious intentions, one of which she used to play street games with disguised as a peasant child, someone who she considers a friend, who immediately tosses her aside as the rest of them steal her shit. They then grab onto her as they plan to sell her to the Nilfgaards because she is essentially a walking bag of money at this point. And after what almost seems like attempted rape, Ciri starts wigging out and the episode ends with her sonic screeching.
Sonic boom!
And that's episode 7, and it kind of makes sense as to why it's the episode with the shortest runtime. A decent portion of Geralt's section was just replaying scenes with slight adjustments here and there. Yennefer's section, aside from the Brotherhood meeting, went nowhere, ignoring her rejection and her projection about her shitty life. Ciri was like 5 minutes of her going to a marketplace, stealing a horse, getting betrayed, and then screeching at people. Yes, that may sound a little reductionist, but that's all that really happened, aside from her losing a ring that belonged to her mum. Which maybe would have meant something more if the show had actually established a connection between the two, but there is none there, so it doesn't really mean anything. The point being that not a lot happens here aside from setup, which will hopefully be paid off by the final episode. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the last episode of the season. We have not much left to cover, and getting through this is going to be relatively easy. All of the character storylines now converge as they are all within the same general location, even though they don't have any physical interaction at all until the very end. Yennefer and the mages arrive at this old fort, joining up with a bunch of villagers willing to fight, hoping to hold out against whatever force the funny German boys decide to throw at them until help arrives. The first third of this section is mainly them preparing for this battle, and the setup of which is not awful, but I simply don't have much to comment on. The one thing I will say as a positive is that you do get some more perspective of the people who are being fucked over by this war, showcasing the impact it is having on the regular Joe.
Nilfgaards blocked the roads, taken everything from us. Nothing left to do but wait for them to attack.
I appreciate that we get scenes like this, but it's too little too late, as I've already gone on about how poorly done the central conflict of this season was handled. The rest of the setup here I have no real thoughts on, aside that I found it very uninteresting. We then move on to the battle itself, which isn't great, but I'll list off some positives first. I'll give credit as the battle feels suitably gritty. People are getting blown apart, sliced open, their heads caved in, all of that good stuff, and most of this action feels like it has some weight and impact behind it. I also like that magic itself plays a easy part in the battle as it allows for interesting situations in both defending and attacking the fort. But, yet again, I have to add a caveat in that some of it is kind of dumb. See, they have these magic crafted shrapnel bombs which they send out using slingers, and I thought this was pretty cool initially, but then they immediately ruin it by having them have to shoot arrows at them in order to trigger it. This is dumb. Do all of these mages and villagers have Deadeye or something so that they can perfectly hit these glass vials from hundreds of feet away? Regardless, I still do appreciate their attempts to use magic. I mean, they definitely could have done more with it, but in terms of issues, this is on the lower end of the problems. It is the other major issues that ruin whatever potential this battle might have had. First and foremost is that a lot of the characters here are completely expendable. In terms of those with significant screen time and development, if we're being charitable, it's at most 4 characters that you could maybe kind of care about. Yet, with everyone else, the most screen time they may have gotten is maybe a sentence or 2 in another scene. So when they die, and they will die, who gives a shit?
Those cowards fled after tonight's attack, but I'm not going anywhere. I've lived enough.
Yeah, sure man, I totally understand this character who has never said anything before now, and who I can't even remember if they were in a previous scene. Oh wait, hold on, I'm sorry, I can't believe I forgot the most important character in the entire series, Uppity Slungo. My bad guys, all criticism is now invalid. Like, I don't know any of these characters, so when their dramatic death scenes happen, I don't feel remotely anything. Now, what I believe that these death scenes are trying to do is something similar to what episode 1 did when showing us Sintra's fall, where they tried to convey a general sense of loss, whereas here they are trying to convey that defeat is a possible outcome and showcasing the horrors of war and conflict. That sort of intended meaning. But like episode 1, it fails to do that meaningfully because I'm not emotionally invested in what's happening here, which is kind of a shame because this is your big final battle for the season, and you'd want to feel the stakes for not only the characters themselves, but for how this event will shape both the rest of the story and the world it resides in. If they made more effective use of their time, or perhaps saved this for the next season, this battle would actually have some meaning or impact. I might have been genuinely engaged and interested in what was happening and where things might lead, however that is not the case. Aside from that though, there are some minor quibbles that I have here and there. An example being is where we get the scene where it's very foggy and misty out as Commander Deutschland here starts telling everyone to move out. Almost immediately after though, it's way sunnier if a little cloudy, and where Mustache McGee starts showing off his epic skills after playing 400 plus hours of Dishonored. I mean, most sane people won't care that the fog disappeared in a matter of moments, however, I'm not sane, so this stuck out like crazy to me. Also, Mustache Man ends up being a turncoat because he kills this mage for seemingly no reason. I know this character is important in the books, but at the moment this reveal doesn't mean anything, and right now it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, as each side takes massive losses, as those dirty nilfers are on the verge of winning, Yennefer decides to take things into her own hands and initiates final Scorched Earth protocol on everything surrounding her. And then she teleports away, ending her storyline for this season.
Bullshit.
Ciri's storyline is quick to get through this episode as not a lot happens. After Sonic screeching all night, she wakes up to find that she killed all of her would-be rapists, pretty graphically in fact, and surprisingly the Good Samaritan from earlier either followed her or somehow was able to find her. Pretty fucking suspicious if you ask me, especially given that she not only stole her horse but also killed it, and she still seemingly is willing to help this girl who she allegedly knows nothing about. Ciri doesn't seem to be perplexed by this, but perhaps that's because she's still in shock. I'm sure after that goes away, she'll start pondering if this lady is more than she seems. We then cut to Ciri just spending time with this lady and her son, who are not too far from the current battle raging on, as they're just trying to keep their heads down and keep out of it. And then we reach this scene which just kind of proves that this lady does not seem very mentally sound.
If I've gone tomorrow, I had everything I wanted. Everything. Except a daughter. I can't help but think I was meant to find you.
Now, this might just be me, but this comes across as kinda weird. Maybe this oddball statement would have worked if they had spent a few days together where you actually see a rapport built between these two, maybe learn more about this woman, but they've known each other about a day, if that, and Ciri has essentially been on mute for this entire time. So when she says this, it kinda comes out of nowhere, and if it's meant to be a heartfelt moment, it comes across as incredibly rushed and very misplaced. Like, do you not think that she has other family that she wants to get back to? Like, did that thought not cross cross your mind at all? Again, this might be a me thing, but I really can't overstate how persistent this woman was when it came to getting Ciri to come with her, so when you consider that on top of this line, this reads to me less as someone who initially appeared as a genuinely decent person, but rather now as someone who was on the verge of pulling out a human-sized birdcage. What makes this worse, might I add, is that Ciri is just completely blank-faced while she is saying this. Like, the fact that she is not even slightly concerned or suspicious of this woman right now is genuinely annoying me. And this scene just kind of cemented another crucial issue for me when it comes to Ciri's character. It seemed to me that throughout the season, the events that have been happening to Ciri over the past week or two were meant to imply that she goes from this sheltered, naive child to this seasoned and somewhat bitter adult who should be careful of who and what she trusts. The fact that some of the first people she comes across makes her realize that perhaps her grandmother was not all she was cracked up to be suggested to me that was the intent. I mean, the first person she meets who selflessly goes out of his way to help her, being a direct victim of her grandmother's reign, seems to further imply that. The point here, as I've previously mentioned, is that the world is a lot more brutal than she was led to believe, and that she needs to understand that and be on her guard in order to survive. But literally all of that goes nowhere as Ciri keeps making the same mistakes over and over again while making a stupid expression 75% of the time. To hammer home this point, let me break this down a bit. So after you lose the home that you've had your entire life, you are subsequently informed that the woman who raised you is not the person you thought she was. This then may plant the seeds of doubt and mistrust in your mind as the world is not what you believed it to be. However, maybe you're still not keen on believing what these people say because they are poor. But when you reunite with your mentor, a man you have known for your entire life, who you trust with said life, turns out to be a bald British shapeshifter who essentially stole his skin and killed him and is now trying to capture you, and when the person who has gone out of their way to help you, especially after learning that you're the granddaughter of the woman who threw his family off rooftops, decides to abandon your ass because you aren't worth the trouble, and when one of your childhood friends reveals that he never gave a shit about you and only associated with you because you were royalty, it should come across your mind that perhaps you should be careful of who you trust because they may either lie, abandon, or betray you at some point or another. It annoys me greatly because Ciri seemingly hasn't realized this because she does not even raise an eyebrow at this incredibly suspicious woman saying this stuff. Like, this woman tracked her down after stealing her horse. She now wants to keep her at her house because it's safe there, while saying weird shit like this. It's almost as if she could be luring you into a false sense of security. It's almost as if you're aware that an entire military force is currently and proactively looking for you, and that they are willing to offer rewards to anyone who can help track you down.
Rumour is, Nilfgaard's looking for you. And willing to pay a barrel of orams too.
I wonder if that could be the case here. And yes, that is not what's happening here, and this woman is simply insane. But my issue isn't that this doesn't happen, it's that Ciri does not seem to consider that this could happen. It's as if she's completely retarded and holds no information over the past few days because she keeps making these same mistakes. I seriously cannot fathom how someone can go through all of this and not be a little bit suspicious and wary of the people around them. Now, while her stealing the lady's horse is a decent indication of that fend for yourself mentality, it's the only time it's shown, and the rest is just her sitting or standing there staring blankly at the void. And if you're going to rush to her defense and say that's not her character arc or that was not the point of her character, then fine, I am more than willing to admit that I am wrong on this. But if that isn't the case, then what is the fucking point then? Like, I don't understand how you have all of these events that seem like they were heading towards a certain direction, but ultimately lead to nothing, because Ciri is still the same naive moron she was at the start of the series. There is absolutely no growth with this character, and I'm just sitting here dumbfounded wondering what the hell that they wanted to do with her. Anyway, I've gone on long enough with this tangent, and that pretty much wraps up Ciri's stuff, except for one scene at the end.
I have to move on.
This then leads us into Geralt's storyline, where he travels through a war-torn countryside, and he comes across this fine gentleman moving corpses around. After warning him that a bunch of ghouls might be stalking about, he decides to move on, as the body mover is then attacked by said ghoulies, and Geralt rushes to his defense. This results in an okay action scene, which has a bunch of random first-person shots for some reason.
They jumping me! They jumping me!
Geralt wipes them all out but gets wounded and poisoned in the process. This then leads into the rest of Geralt's section for this episode, with him being in this weird fever-like dream state, glimpsing memories from his past. This is akin to how it is in the book, but in the book the memories there were a lot different and a lot more interesting than what we're given here. Not to mention that those flashbacks were meant to explore Geralt to try and understand what this destiny business actually means in order to convey a wider theme that is completely removed from the show. So as the corpse enthusiast is transporting Geralt to his home, we are shown how Geralt looked as a small child, how he was abandoned by his mother to become a witcher, and how this eventually leads back to the current day where his mother ends up treating his wound. I am not the greatest fan of any of this. I'll start with Geralt's flashbacks as a child, which I dislike because they are completely unnecessary. Now do correct me if I am mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that Geralt's past as a child is only occasionally mentioned within the books and the games. The most that we get is that his mother abandoned him for unexplained reasons, and we are given some details on his training to become a witcher, but those details are never directly shown, and if they are, it is done very rarely. This to me is the better option because I personally feel that Geralt works better as a character when you leave some room for speculation and interpretation into his past. When you're a lot more sparse on the details, one can speculate how his early years shaped his worldview, one can speculate how his previous life was, and one can speculate the circumstances that led him to becoming a witcher in the first place. Now I believe I've already said this during Yen's early sections, but yes, there is a time and a place for showing characters' backstories. In many ways, they strengthen both a character and a story, but it should always be done when it is the more interesting direction. In this case, it is not, because the way that they are presented does not serve as an interesting exploration of Geralt's character, primarily because they don't really give much insight into his character, making me question these scenes' necessity. We're not gaining a new understanding or perspective of Geralt's past, we're not given a snapshot of how he came to form the beliefs that he has. The most we get is a tangential statement of his mother saying that you need to cling to something, otherwise the world turns to shit.
We have to cling to something. If we don't, the world descends into chaos.
Which is presented as if it's meant to be some important code or motto for Geralt to hold on to, but this is literally the worst person to be saying this. Like, why would he listen or follow the advice of the person who literally abandoned him? This then leads into Geralt reuniting with his mother in the present, which also feels unneeded because it really doesn't go anywhere. Like the book, she only shows up for this sequence, but afterwards she never appears again. Granted, I wasn't much of a fan of her appearance in the short story either, because it really didn't lead to anything, but at least in the novel, her showing up was, again, to help convey a wider point within the story. I mean, the show does do something similar, but they ignore the thematic element of the story, which was exploring and questioning the meaning behind destiny, so instead of that, they just went with destiny important, go find random child.
It's time for you to find what you let go of.
Ignoring all of that, this scene drives me insane because this woman is a complete cunt.
I need to know why.
No answer will give you what you want.
Fuck off.
Don't ask any more questions.
Why?
The answers will only hurt us both.
I don't think it could hurt him any worse than you abandoning him.
It's time to move on, Geralt.
You know, kind of hard for him to do that when you are so unwilling to answer his very reasonable questions about why you left him. Hey, here's an idea. If you say that we must cling to something, otherwise the world descends into chaos, how about you cling to your child, you stupid bitch? Neither these flashbacks or this scene with Geralt's mother offer much in terms of substance, and both are completely unneeded. Also, it's very funny how with this final episode, Yen's storyline has her involved in this big epic battle where she saves the day, but for Ciri and Geralt, it's either them sitting in some random house or tweaking out in the back of a cart for a majority of the episode. Be sure to draw your own conclusions from that. Other than all of that, there is not much left of note aside from the final scene, where it's revealed that the man who has been helping Geralt is the husband of the child groomer, which eventually leads to Geralt and Ciri finally meeting each other in the forest. The show treats it as this very important moment, but as I've already discussed, completely unearned, not meaningful in the slightest. Also, the final shot of the season is this image of Geralt looking like he has just shat himself. And roll credits.
I'm finished.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. We've finally come to the end of this season. My final verdict? Not very good. As we are now drawing to a close, I think the best thing to do is to give an overall assessment of each storyline for our three main characters. In considering which is the worst and which is the best, it's very easy to draw that conclusion. I've made it no secret that I do not like Yen's or Ciri's storyline this season, so they are both automatically at the bottom of the scale. However, despite my numerous issues with Yen, both with her character and her storyline, at the very least I can say hers is better because she actually undergoes change, both physically and mentally. There is actual character progression here, and while I don't like it, and I don't like who she is, it's at the very least more substantive than anything Ciri has been given. Ciri has absolutely no growth as a character, and whatever elements of potential growth that are there, they have been completely squandered. Every time she was on screen, I was incredibly bored. Yennefer, like I said, fares somewhat better because at least the events in her storyline went somewhere, but I was just never interested in where they were heading. There was not a lot of tension or intrigue for her story arc, and that's even ignoring my personal biases against her, because even if I didn't have those biases, I would still say that her plotlines throughout the show aren't that interesting. So unsurprisingly, Geralt's storyline is the best this season has to offer. Also unsurprisingly, a lot of the material in it is pulled from the books. Curious that, even then, the stories that the show adapts are just inferior retellings. So, when looking at these three storylines combined, the overall package is a fairly subpar show that has some decent production value and some good performances here and there, but is ultimately held down by poor pacing, substandard characterization, and little to no personality that not only doesn't make it stand out, but makes it a slog to get through. And that's not even mentioning how the show handled the adaptation of its source material. Hell, a majority of the original material that they incorporated ended up being the worst parts of the show, and that's kind of hilarious in a sad sort of way. Now, for the unaware individual, you might be a tad confused at how the show turned out the way it did, but upon learning that Miss Hissrich, the showrunner herself, had declined to be involved in the show initially because she didn't think she'd be a good fit,
and Netflix came to me and asked me if I'd want to adapt it, I said no. That I was a huge fan, but I didn't think I was the right person to adapt a fantasy show.
But then Netflix forced the issue, you will begin to see how the cracks started to form. So keep in mind, while it is easy to blame Hissrich and co for this complete mess, and some of that blame is deserved, do not forget that it is Netflix that is ultimately behind all of this shit. Netflix pushed the issue, allowing them to do whatever the hell they wanted because they didn't care about anything involved in this franchise, they only cared about pushing content. This is further compounded by the fact that a former writer alleged that a lot of the writers and directors of the show hated the source material, and when well-established directors have creative differences to the point of them leaving the show, leading to large chunks of material being reshot, is it any surprise that this is how the show turned out? Now, will I be covering the rest of the series? The answer to that is an outright no, for two reasons. The first of them being that you are all likely aware that Henry Cavill has now bailed on this series, and if these videos alone did not convince you of the overall quality of the show, him leaving it should. This wasn't a contractual or monetary project for him. If you look at the promotional tour for the first season, Cavill repeatedly states that he was desperately trying to be involved in this adaptation.
Then I heard that Netflix were making it, and I had my agents on the phone every day. Literally every day, I would call them and say, anything yet? Call them again. And we got through eventually, and they said, look, we haven't got a script yet, we've barely got a showrunner, so we can't give you an answer.
Like, a person does not essentially beg to be a part of the show, then suddenly decides to bail on it completely without good reason. It is clearly obvious that Henry was not happy with the direction that the show was going, and if your flagship star does not want to be involved in the show anymore,
Netflix.
It should highlight that the quality hasn't improved much. So I don't see much point in me covering more of the series because I feel like I would be repeating myself. I mean, I'm already aware that they do some outrageous dumb shit in the later seasons, like in season 2, Yennefer loses her magic briefly, and in an attempt to get it back, she considers sacrificing Ciri to a demon. Which, the jokes write themselves, don't they? The second reason, and the more legitimate reason, is that I'm not really interested in talking about this series anymore, not just in terms of the show, but the franchise in general. When you work on something like this for a good while, you really do start to feel that fatigue, and I'm just kind of sick of it at the moment. Like, look how long it took me to do one season. You think I want to do that again? 4 more times? No, thank you! Legit would kill any waning interest I had in the franchise. I also know that the 4th game is coming out at some stage, and I have absolutely no interest in that either. So yeah, the burnout for me is pretty real when it comes to this series. Now, that may sound slightly blackpilling, however, the subject that should be focused on for my next video has the opposite problem, as my appreciation and passion for that series has only strengthened further. And if you think I sounded pissed off and annoyed with this show, or just you fucking wait for the next video because you haven't seen anything yet. Anyway, regardless how I feel about it, The Witcher ultimately deserved better. It is not a flawless series, but there was some cool and interesting stuff in it that the show does not capitalize on. And yes, while it's not the worst thing in existence, that still doesn't negate that the fact that the show itself is subpar. Bad material is still bad material, and while it could have turned out worse, it also could have and should have turned out way better. So if you guys wanted to check out the series, have at it. I suggest reading the books than playing the games. However, if you think reading is for pussies and you want to go hit the gym, stick with the games. You don't necessarily need the books to play them, but it will definitely help with a lot of things you may or may not be confused about. Again, not all of it is perfect, it's kind of shit in some cases, but there is enough solid stuff there for you to get some enjoyment out of it. Unless you don't actually give a shit about it and you were just here because you were more interested in hearing some Australian spurg ranting about dumb shit for over 3 hours. Anyway, that's that. Thank you for joining me on this very long and arduous journey, and I now return to my peaceful slumber. Farewell until next time.